This is an interview with George Landecker on May 2nd, 2004 at the Virginia Holocaust Museum, Richmond, Virginia, conducted by Inga W. Horowitz, Chuck Weizenhofer, camera person. Mr. Landecker, could you please state and spell your name and then your place of birth?
My name is George Landecker, George Landecker. I was born October 1st in Nordenburg, East Prussia, which is a small town in what is now Russia. Was then Germany.
Do you know the name of that town today?
The name of the town is Nordenburg.
Today.
As it's today, no, I don't.
Okay.
I heard it, but I don't remember it, no.
You lived in Nordenburg until what year?
I lived in Nordenburg until 1934.
Okay.
When the
How
school,
old are you now?
I'm now 85.
And please tell us your present address.
My present address is 107 Van der Kamp Avenue in Barneveld, New York, 13304.
Thank you. What languages do you speak?
English and German.
Could you please describe your life before the Holocaust began? And I believe you have one picture there of your family that you could show us.
Yeah, we lived in a small middle-class family. My father had a business hauling things from the railroad station. There was a small Jewish community of about 8 or 10 families there. We did have a synagogue, but we did not have any service except for the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We had a very integrated German family. My father thought himself more of a German than a Jew. He was not very religious, while my grandparents on my mother's side were very Orthodox religious, and they lived nearby. We lived in a town, and we never had any trouble. Since we thought ourselves was German, all our friends were Germans. Most of the friends my father had were the German population, until that changed in 1934. Slowly at first in 34, but in 33 when Hitler came to power, by 34 I was not allowed to continue school, and later on my family was kicked out of the local schools.
So in 1934 you turned 16. What was your education before that?
I had 4 years of public school, what's called public school then, and then if you are going to do in academia or study something, you had to take some tests, and you went into what was called there high school or gymnasium. In other words, you were oriented towards going to university. And I had 5 years of that in that little town, and then the school ended, and I graduated from that school in 1934 and would have to go on to the next town, and then I was not given permission to go on to the next school.
What experiences with anti-Semitism do you remember in the 30s in your town? How did that develop? At first you described your life as perfectly normal and no problems.
Well, my father very quickly lost his business because that was an official position employed, sanctioned by the government, the railroad. And we had very little income, I did not really experience the worst insults of anti-Semitism that my family was exposed to, because they started a little later. When I left in 1934, I was employed by a Jewish firm in a larger town, so I was mostly associated with the Jewish community and not the non-Jewish community.
Okay. What larger town? Where did you go then?
The town was called Königsberg. It's called now Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad.
Also in Russia?
In East Prussia. Oh, it's part Russia now, yes.
And what did you do there?
I had a job in a clothing factory, learning to be a business education, but there was no future in it. And I was quite active in some German Jewish organizations. And when we heard that the retraining center of Gross-Breesen was formed, two of us in that group applied for it, because most of the recruits for Gross-Breesen came from this Jewish youth organization at first.
What was the name of that organization?
Bund Deutsch-Jüdische Jugend. And they came mostly from families who were very German assimilated, not Orthodox Jews, and especially not Zionist, not oriented going to what was then called Palestine.
And it had an acronym, there were initials, it was called by some...
BDJJ, Bund Deutsch-Jüdische Jugend.
And in English, those letters are B, D...
J, J. B, D, J, J, yes.
That's quite well known. Was that a resistance? Did they offer resistance to what was going on?
No, but since most of us would have belonged to some kind of youth organization, and we were excluded from all the German or the normal youth organization, this was in response to having some kind of a youth organization. We had not only that we had activities, but we also belonged to a sports organization. We had our own field of sports activities with swimming pools and playing soccer, and we had soccer leagues playing against other Jewish teams, not non-Jewish teams that we could find. And so there were a number of Zionist groups that were formed at that time, and this was the only non-Zionist group, but we were all together in one building. Had our meetings in our one building.
In Königsberg?
In Königsberg, yeah.
So what happened then? You said you heard about Gross-Breesen. Explain, what is Gross-Breesen?
Gross-Breesen was a retraining center founded by the Jewish community in Germany, because they realized we had to immigrate, and most countries would not accept people with a business or an academic background, and especially the people who were oriented toward Israel or Zionists. The farming needs there were greater, so they most of them were agricultural, but they also had training in carpentry and training in blacksmithing and training in gardening quite a bit. And this was founded in Eastern Germany and was founded by the Jewish community and had about 130, 140 students in it. And the idea of it was originally to immigrate as a group and found a communal organization somewhere in the world, founded based on Judaism, German culture, and agriculture.
I see.
And they hired a Jewish professor of psychology as its leader, and we spent about 2 years, 2.5 years there before we had to leave Germany.
You were there when it was founded?
I was one of the earliest. It was founded early in May, or opened early in May, and I think I came there around the 10th of May of 1936.
Really?
And the other friend of mine from that same town, he came there for some reason. He left a little earlier, but he met me at the train station, and we were one of the early founders there. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I didn't know I didn't want to be a farmer. Didn't want to have anything to do with agriculture.
You did not?
I did not want to be a farmer. I had done little farm work in the community, and for some reason I didn't want to be a farmer. And while I was there, I got very friendly with two of the instructors, Jewish instructors that were hired.
Yes.
And since the place was new and was just being developed, everybody had to help out wherever they could.
Yeah.
And I did farm work, and since my father had horses before, my grandparents had cows, I was a little bit exposed to that, so I was compared with the rest of the people that came from the cities. I was more of an expert already, so I knew how to handle horses.
And you were 18.
And I got interested in farming and changed my mind.
Yes, you liked it.
And
if my arithmetic is right, you were 18 in 1936.
I was 18 in 1936, yes.
Tell us about this leader, this psychologist who was selected by whom and how?
Well, I really don't know that much. I know that Martin Buber, the German Jewish philosopher,
Yes.
was a friend of Professor Bondi's, and he recommended Bondi as the head of that school. But who else was involved with it? It was the Reichsvertretung der Juden in Deutschland that founded it.
What is it called?
The Reichsvertretung, the national representative of German Jews.
Reichsvertretung der
Juden in Deutschland.
Der Juden in Deutschland. Okay. How do you spell his name, the leader?
Bondi, Kurt was his first name, C-U-R-T, B-O-N-D-I.
So I think maybe we'll save pictures for later because it might disrupt things. Or perhaps at this time, I'm going to change my mind. Show us, please, who you were up until this point. What brought you to Gross-Breesen? Your family, yourself, early on?
This is a picture of my mother and my 4 other siblings, plus one other girl that was taken on a visit to my grandparents who lived outside the town and had a little business there. And it was probably the only automobile that was available in that little town and belonged to my father's cousin, the father of one of the girl in here.
How many brothers and sisters?
I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. My mother and father and 2 sisters and 1 brother emigrated to South America, and 1 brother who was 2 years younger than I am could not emigrate. Couldn't get out, and he and his wife and little child probably got killed somewhere, but we never been able to find out anything what happened to him, except that he was sent to Poland somewhere in the early 40s.
And the next picture, George?
And this is a picture of me active in that youth organizations when we were playing sports. I was doing running and playing soccer quite a bit. It was my main interest.
And we'll get to the others later.
Oh, they even come to the others later, okay.
So you said you were in Gross-Breesen learning the trades, working with the animals for 2 years?
I was there for approximately a year and a half, and then I had one of the fellows there had been on a sheep farm in southern Germany, and he left. I forgot now why he left, but he recommended that Gross-Breesen send somebody else in his place to that sheep farm in southern Germany, and for some reason I was picked. I don't know whether he asked me or whether somebody recommended me. And somewhere in 37, I think it probably was October of 1937, I went to that sheep farm in southern Germany. That sheep farm was owned by a Jewish family. They had a fairly large sheep cow farm, and they also owned a brewery where they made beer, and they lived in an old little castle that was very picturesque and very attractive. And the brewery was inside that castle.
So that's when you left Gross-Breesen. Tell us a little bit about life on Gross-Breesen, the philosophy, what Dr. Bondi instituted there.
The philosophy was based on hard work, and we had some instruction in agriculture, but basically was learning to do the work that nobody has done before, because most people came from the cities, had no idea what it was. We had to get up very early in the morning, took a cold shower in the morning. There were no hot water there. We ate together in a communal dining room, had our breakfast in the morning. The life was very organized, very, in a way, militaristic. We had to line up in the morning and got our job assignments, unless we had taken care of the horses or working in the cow barn when it was predetermined where you worked. And we worked hard all day long, doing whatever needed to be done on the farm as the seasons go on.
Were there men, women?
There were only 15 or 20 women there. There was the farm manager was a Jew who had been trained in agriculture, had gone to university, and he was in charge of the farm operation, and Bondi was in charge of the overall operation, and he had a secretary and a staff of about 5 or 6 young Jewish men and women who all had started out doing something different and realized early in 33 that they have no future in whatever they were doing and had changed over to agriculture, so they were hired as the instructors. And there was also a German population on the farm, the people that used to work the farm. Oh. And there were probably 7, 8 different non-Jewish families who worked in a farm, who did quite a bit of the working with the horses and stuff like that, that most of us were not capable of doing at first, especially.
All together, you said
we all worked together, yes.
About 100, more than 100.
And you see, we were then that way quite protected from anti-Semitism too, because these people were working for a Jewish owners. They did not have a chance or didn't dare being anti-Semitic early on.
What was the physical setting of Gross-Breesen? Was there a main house?
It was an old, what was called in German, Schloss, an old estate. large estates that was owned by a Polish Jew, and he turned it over. I think he gave it to the organization for the purpose of establishing the school, and his daughter stayed on in that building and was quite active in different groups.
Mr. Landecker, there was one person at Gross-Breesen who ended up in Richmond, a carpenter, a Kiwi.
Who was it?
Kiwi.
Oh, Hermann Kiwi, yes. His father and Hermann were trained carpenters, or they probably were more trained in furniture making, fine, better carpentry. But they taught carpentry in Gross-Breesen, and his father, I believe, was killed in a concentration camp. But Hermann got to hide Farmlands, and he later on became a carpenter or cabinet maker in Richmond, Virginia.
Now, thank you. That kind of gives us a picture of Gross-Breesen. Then you went to the sheep farm, and then came 1938. Tell us what happened next.
The idea of emigrating together as a group fell through. We had a plan of going to Brazil as a group, and we had a committee went to Brazil, and they were told we were welcome to come, but by the time they got back to Germany and told us about it, we were also told that if we went to Brazil, we all would have to convert and become Catholics, and that nullified that idea. So different plans developed. One of them was the plan to Virginia for about 30, 40 people. Another plan developed going to Australia, and another group went to Argentina. Some from that farm school went to Argentina. And I had the idea of coming to Virginia was to get us out of Germany outside the quota, and by owning property in Virginia and proving to the American consul in Germany that we had some farm experience, we were supposedly admitted within 2 or 3 months and outside the quota for German Jews.
So all of this you knew. When did this become known, that there was an opportunity in Virginia?
Probably sometimes in 1937, towards the end of 37. And I was then already on the farm in southern Germany, so I really was not very much involved in what developed, but my girlfriend, whose mother was an American, was going to America, had signed me up for that group, and my parents actually had visas to go to South America and had a visa for me to go with them.
I see.
But I was determined to go to North America.
Do you know how the Virginia connection was made?
No, I really don't know.
You have never read or heard?
I have, you asked me that once, and I have just recently written to Ernst Kramer and asked him that question. There was an organization in New York, Joint. I think that still exists.
The Joint Distribution,
Joint,
JDC.
Yes. And my idea is they and Mr. Thalhammer got together and somehow got information about Bondi and Gross-Breesen group and got together. Who made that, I don't know.
Very interesting. Well, then came what happened to you on Kristallnacht, and where were you?
I had quit my job in southern Germany and went to where my girlfriend lived in Germany to get ready for my immigration to America. And I was arrested.
Where was she living, and where were you?
In Frankfurt Germany, which is Western Germany.
Yes.
And I was arrested on the day after Kristallnacht and sent to Buchenwald. And the Gross-Breesen boys were also arrested the day after Kristallnacht and also sent to Buchenwald. And I met up with that group in Buchenwald, the concentration camp. And most of that group was discharged within 4 weeks or so. And I was in about 2 weeks because I came from a different area. A friend of mine who was already in Holland, one of the Gross-Breesen boys, got permits for several of us to come to Holland and wait for the American visa in Holland on the basis of that that permit to go to Holland. The Gestapo released me from Buchenwald, and I had to sign some paper that I would leave Germany within, I don't remember, it was 30 days or 60 days. That was because they had not started the systematic killings.
Right. Could you describe your arrest in Frankfurt and your treatment in Buchenwald, please?
In Germany, when you move from one place to the other, you have to report your activities. Oh, yes, you have to report your activities to the police. And even though I was completely new in Frankfurt, the police knew exactly where I was. They just came to the door and said, "You are under arrest." And I was not allowed to take anything with me. And I really don't remember very much about it. Fairly recently, I happened to read the report about somebody who was arrested in Frankfurt and sent by train to Buchenwald. And when I read that through, I said, "Gee, that's me. That's my story." And some of the things came back, but I think your mind tries to eliminate unpleasant things.
Yes. So you were released. You were then...
I was released and I had a chance to go and visit my family. I went back to Gross-Breesen because some of my things were in Gross-Breesen. And I think, if I remember right, I came back to Frankfurt, and from there on I went to Holland. And that was, in Holland, that was a farm community which just serves the purpose of getting people out of Germany and holding them long enough to go to some other country.
Where was that in Holland?
It was in the land that the Dutch reclaimed from the North Sea, polder.
What?
They call it a polder, P-O-L-D-E-R. It was a farm that had dairying in it and grain production, potatoes, sugar beets.
Was that also operated by Jewish agency?
It was operated by a Jewish agency, yes. Who operated it? I really don't know.
All right. We have now been joined by Mr. Morton Thalheimer. Will you come forward, please?
How are you, Morton?
George,
Nice to meet you.
it is such a pleasure. Again.
I think I found it. I brought
Good morning.
Good morning.
Have a seat. Okay. Now we're just going to put this here, and I will. Okay. We will continue. You came at a very propitious moment because we have George now out of Buchenwald in Holland waiting to come to America to the Thalheimer farm. And while we're...
And what year was this?
Go ahead.
I came to America in February of 1940. Several of the people from Gross-Breesen came to what we called Farmlands in '39 already.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, there were quite a few people that came directly from Germany, some that came from England, that were there much earlier. than I was. We were 5 of us in Holland, and we came in February of 1940 in a snowstorm.
One of the few in Virginia. I
One of the
suppose.
few in Virginia. It was quite an event then. But I came from a country in Germany that had a lot of snow, so I was used to it.
Well, Inga, you're
George,
going to.
you have some pictures there. And if you'll hold up, or maybe give the pictures
Thi-
to Morton, and you explain, please, Morton, your relationship to the people.
This is a picture that somebody sent to me. It was taken of a group of people that went to hide Farmlands, probably your father and William Fatima involved. When they went to look at the farm before it was, when they were getting ready to buy it.
Yes.
Do you recognize people?
I think the person second from the right could be William Tallhammer Sr.
Yes.
I do not recognize.
And
the
there is a name in the back of
let's see.
somebody named Warmburg. He was, I remember the name, he was somewhere involved with this joint organization, I think. He,
George Landecker seems to think that it was the JDC, the Joint
Distribution
Distribution
Committee. Yeah.
that was instrumental in joining the Tallheimer cousins, your father, and who was
William.
Now, my father was Morton, and Morton was in the real estate business. And so William, being in the retail business of the department stores, I think my father had the assignment to go find a farm where we
Oh,
could
I
then
see.
bring these people over and settle them in the United States here in Virginia.
Well, do you know who brought Bondi and this Warmbrunn together? You don't know that either.
I do not know that. I can remember, I think, going down when my father was in the process of finding and purchasing the farm, and then later of visiting the farm after some of the young men and women from Germany got over here. That's which would have been in my teen years then.
Well, we were all just in our teens or past the teens when we, in 1940, I was 21 when I came here.
What about the next picture there?
Yeah, well, this is Morton according to the picture.
Yes,
To the
that would be my father on the left and my mother next to him. And then from New York, Hyde Farmlands. I don't know who the other couple is.
Would you hold this picture up, please, before you go
And
on?
this is on a group of people from our Gross-Breesen, evidently taken at the same time.
Can you hold that up for the camera, George? Thank you. That big American flag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a picture of Hyde Farmlands. You probably remember that.
Well, I cannot truthfully say that.
Well, these are all people I know.
Yes, they were there with you. but,
Yes.
I had no particular reason, since I would go down for maybe several hours
Yeah,
with my father, to have a recollection of just what the house looked like. But it's nice to see it again and to know
there
that
it
I
is,
was
George.
there.
This is the house.
Yes. And we had the pleasure of meeting the present owner of that house when she was here, April
Yeah.
28th
Yeah.
of last
Yeah.
year.
Last year.
I have talked to her.
George,
and
would
we-
you hold up the picture of the house as it looked in those days, and has it changed very much?
No, I have pictures that were taken in 1990 and pictures that was taken in 1940, and except for the size of the trees, there really is not that much change. This is one of the adjoining houses. It says in the back here, a family by name of, what's their name? lived in it, but I lived in that house
Mr. and
when
Mrs. It looks like PIGG.
when I was in.
The tenant farmer's house.
Yeah.
Could you hold that up, please?
Three of us lived upstairs in that building, and the downstairs was the office, office for the farm.
Could you talk about what else your family did for these so-called youngsters? They were referred to as youngsters.
Well, we like to both think that going back to those years, we were definitely youngsters compared to now, but my father accidentally got into running motion picture theaters in 1926, and that originated because he was a realtor. So I do recall that when the young people from Hyde Farmlands could come to Richmond on weekends, that my father was able to provide them with passes to almost all of the movies in Richmond. And if they weren't the theaters that were run by our family, they were certainly theaters of friends, and we could get those passes as well during that time. My father was the head of several bond drives during the war, and as such, that's all right, that he became friendly with perhaps an awful lot of people supporting our troops in World War II that he might not have known otherwise. But I remember when we reunited last April the 28th, either you or Mrs. Lowe told me that you recall being able to sort of have your choice of movies to see on the weekends here.
I remember going to one or two movies, and we had a big Ford truck with a rack on the side, and the whole gang would pile up in the back and drive us to the movie. One little side note was we also saw Gone with the Wind. Then, and when a group of American students from a nearby college came and visited us on a farm, they offered to sing some American songs, and we asked us if we knew any American song. We didn't, but one of the boys remembered a tune, and he whistled the tune, and it turned out to be, it was from Gone with the Wind, Marching on Georgia, on Atlanta. And the girls did not appreciate that very much.
I can understand that.
Do you remember the neighboring farm and
The only farm I remember is the farm of the Hamlin family.
Yes?
He was a local farmer who befriended us and came to the farm and gave us advice, and he would invite the whole group over to his farm, and he had watermelons in a big tub outside, and we eat watermelons at his place. But that's the only farm actually I remember, as far neighboring farms go.
Do you remember the son who lived?
No, they must have been very young. My wife and I once, after we had been married and after I'd been in the service, came back and visited Hyde Farmlands, and we stayed with the Franklins overnight.
Franklin?
Hamlins.
Hamlin.
No, Franklin was the name of the farm manager.
How do you spell Hamlin?
Hamlin, I believe.
I believe so.
Yes. We stayed with them overnight. That must have been in 43. And I think he took us to the farm, to Hyde Farmlands then. But I don't remember that much about it either.
George, did most of the men at Hyde Farmlands return with the U.S. Army to Europe during the war?
Practically everyone except two guys who were physically handicapped went into the service. Most of them fought in the European War, but several of them fought in the Pacific War. Yes.
I do know that the experience of meeting all of you had a profound effect on Dick Hamlin, who wanted to come here today, but was not well enough.
Oh, he is not well.
He wanted to meet.
Maybe that's why he hasn't responded. I have written to him and sent him notices of our get-togethers several times, and he had indicated to one of our groups that he wanted to come, but he has never responded. Maybe he is not well enough to.
Well, he said he thought it would be too emotional for him.
Oh.
Perhaps when you're here, you might reach him by telephone at some point.
Yeah,
Yes.
we could do that. That
Could
would be a
try
good
to
idea,
call
yeah.
him. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Morton, for coming and
Been my pleasure.
sharing this little piece of your family's history.
Well, it was certainly an emotional moment for me last April to embrace you
Yeah.
and
Well-
to hear what you said about just being here with your family because of my father.
Well, it was your father who probably saved the life of the largest part of that group of ours,
Well-
because when I was in Holland, there were several other fellows from that Gross-Breesen school there who were waiting for visas to other countries and who didn't get out, and then later on was killed by the Nazis when the Germans overran Holland. So by getting us out of Germany, and he saved our lives.
How many were there on high farmland? How many
I think at the most we were 35 or so. I really don't. I have made a list of it. I think that we sent it to you once. I really don't know. I don't think I came up with completely 35. Some of the people we have lost track of completely, and of course some of them have died, and quite a few of them have died in the meantime.
How many do you think will be coming back in September? Have any idea? At this
I added it up, and I think there is more interest. We had a yearly meeting, and the group has been getting smaller. But because we are coming to the Holocaust Museum in Virginia and contemplating maybe even going out to the farm, I think we have a little more interest. I counted it up, and I came up with 27 or 28, but we will only know that for sure once I send out the letter of invitation. I had just last week a call from a fellow who now lives in Israel, and he is planning to visit his sister in Pittsburgh, and he is trying to combine make his visit to his sister at the time when we have our get-together, so he can join us in Richmond. And several of the children of our group, who are now, of course, adults, they are planning to bring their parents along. So we may have better turnouts than we had lately.
Now, that includes children.
That
the
includes children.
27.
They are not, yes.
Children.
How
Because
many of the original people do you think will be here in the dates
maybe
will-
10, 12,
10? That's pretty good.
yeah.
Yes.
Ernst Kramer, who was an assistant to Bondis and lives in Berlin now, he told me he is coming. And he is 91.
But that would
And-
be remarkable and wonderful.
And there's another fellow that lives now in Berlin, who came originally from Berlin. He has part of his family living in this country yet. And he told me he'll try to combine the visit to his family with the date of in September and come to it. So I think we'll have pretty good turnout. There's a family living in Charlottesville, North Carolina, whose father,
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte, North Carolina, whose father was in our group and who had not told the family much about his background, and she got in touch with us, and she joined us in one of the meetings, and she told me that both she and her brother and maybe her mother will join us in Richmond too.
Good.
And so as soon as I get home after this meeting and talking to the hotel, I'm going to send out a letter, and then within 2-3 months, I'll get the responses there, and I've made arrangements with the hotel to let them know at least 30 days prior to the meeting how many people will come.
That will be wonderful.
Right.
Yes. Thank you so very much for coming down.
It's been my pleasure.
Okay,
George,
good to see you.
God bless you.
I hope you or your family will be able to join us in September.
I'm going to do my very best to be here.
Okay, we are meeting at the Crown Plaza, and I think, as I told you in the email, that was we always arrive on Friday afternoons. That would be it's a good time Friday that evening if you think you can. Your
That will
family
be the
can
10th.
That be the 10th.
Fine.
Then we are planning to. Inge has made arrangements for us to get to come to the Holocaust Museum at 11 o'clock the next morning, and we'll see the Holocaust Museum. And these are tentative plans. And then maybe that afternoon we try to drive out to the farm, and usually we leave again on Sunday
Well,
after
I know-
lunch.
I know Inga will keep me up to date on what's going on, and I will try to spend as much time as I can with the group.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you
See you
so
again. Thank
very
you.
Bye.
much. Okay. Now,
Are we done? Or
no, we are not done. We haven't finished with your life, and we need to do that. I would like to know the name of the brother and his family who perished.
my brother,
Yes,
his first name was Herbert,
Herbert
and
Landecker.
I forgot the name of his wife.
And
I didn't know her much because he actually married her after I had gone to Gross-Breesen. So I met her once when I came back, but I've forgotten the name. My sister knew it.
And how were you reunited, or were you reunited with your remaining family that went then to what country?
Chile.
Chile.
Chile. After the war was over, my two sisters and brothers, or during the war, they became Zionists while they were living in Chile. And they went to Hachshara, which is a training center for Zionists. And in 1945, two of them went to Israel, and my two sisters. My brother went a little bit later, and my mother and father came to America. By then I had bought a farm, and they came and stayed with us on the farm in Remsen, New York. That was
Wow.
in, I think in the spring of 1947.
After the war.
I bought the farm in 1936,
We have not
46.
I want to go back to the ending of Hyde Farmland in Nottoway County. You farmed there, and what did you do on Hyde Farmland? Your
Hyde Farms,
group
we
of
had a
30
few cows, we raised some pigs, we grew tobacco. We worked together with, I am not quite sure which university it is, Virginia Land-Grant Colleges.
VPI?
I think it was VPI,
Virginia
yeah.
Polytechnic
Yes.
Institute.
And we planted some crops that were unusual for the area, like berries and grapes and fruit trees, to develop an alternative to tobacco farming. And we also built 10 chicken houses that we cut the logs ourselves, and we built brooder houses that we built the blocks, made the blocks ourselves to raise baby chicks in, and we sold the eggs from those 10 chicken houses to a farm hatchery, not for eating eggs, but by selling them to a hatchery, you got a better price for that farm. So each of those
eggs.
houses held 250 chickens, and that was 2,500. We built 10 houses. That was, for that time, fairly large operation already.
And
that-
that was accomplished in what years? How
That
long?
they were built somewhere in like 1940.
You
and
arrived
finished.
there when?
I arrived there in February 1940, and I believe the houses had not been started. I think they were built that summer. And I know I was involved in making blocks for the cinder blocks, because my job was to scoop out the sand out of a creek that we, with a team of mules, that we used to mix the blocks out.
And how did you bake them?
They had forms and they mixed it, the sand and the cinder and cement probably.
Oh,
And then they were
cement.
poured into those blocks, and I think they were just set out to dry, and they had to set a certain length of time, and we built 2 big houses, fairly big houses. One of them is still standing, I'm pretty
Really?
sure. Yeah. One of them
know-
burned down.
When you arrived, February 1940, were you among the first?
No, there were quite a few people there already.
I see.
Oh, yeah,
When did
quite.
it begin, really? Do you
Sometimes
know?
in *39, I think the earliest, probably, I don't think, a fellow by the name of Ernest Lowe was one of the first ones to arrive there.
He
and-
married Eva?
And he is the one who later on married Eva,
I
yes.
see. So it was after Kristallnacht, November 38, and then 39.
Yeah.
That's when it...
I believe he may have come, but I am not sure about that, because he had an uncle living in New England, in Connecticut. So he may have come, immigrated through his son, but then came to Hyde Farmlands as part of the group, yes.
Not through his son. He immigrated through his, you said,
Through his uncle.
his uncle, right. So you arrived in February 40, and when did you leave? And you accomplished these very creative, novel...
We had some problems living together as a community. It was not economically very feasible. The Thalhammer family had to finance quite a bit of it, even though we sold the tobacco and we sold the eggs, but the expenses were more, and there was an American farmer hired as a farm manager, so there were financial problems. And one of the attempts to cut down expenses was the American employee, the farm manager, was let go, and we took over the actual management of the farm for a short time. But what really led to dissolving Hyde Farmlands, the details, I'm very vague about it. Some of the fellows wanted to go out and earn money because they thought they could provide money for their families to get out of Germany. And we only got very little, I think we got $4 a month pocket money. We had no income. So I think all those things came together and contributed. And then I don't know if anybody started enlisting in the army in 1940. Probably the enlistment in the army only started until after Pearl Harbor. We were not citizens, but because we had declared our intention of becoming American citizens, we came under the draft law, which was passed in the fall of 1940. So we could not enlist in the army, but we came under the draft law, and we had to register for the draft in Nottoway County.
I see. When did you become an American citizen?
I became an American citizen in 1943 in Baltimore, Maryland, after I was in the army. The army would not send anybody overseas unless you were an American citizen.
I see.
Because if you were captured and were not a citizen, you would not come under the Geneva Convention.
But they could draft you with just the
They-
intention.
Just the intention, you came under fell under the draft law. But then they sent me, the first thing they did when I had my basic training, they sent me somewhere to, I think I had to do some tests or something. I really don't remember that either.
And then you join the army, and tell us a little bit about your army experience.
I tried to enlist and was turned down because I had a bad eye, and then I got in anyhow. I was, after my draft board knew that I wanted to get into service, I was called up. You had a lottery system where you had a certain number, but as soon as you gave your intention of wanting to serve and fight against Germany or fight for your country mostly, then you were drafted immediately. And I was inducted and was trained in the infantry in Georgia, and stayed in this country as was kept on that training camp as a training instructor, and then later on I was an instructor in camp in Maryland that prepared people for overseas duty. And in 1944 I was sent to Europe and was assigned to an infantry division and fought in France and in Germany as an infantryman. But when I was transferred, when we came into Germany, division headquarters needed people who spoke German, and I was transferred to from the line company to division headquarters where they needed people who spoke German. When the war was over, I was transferred out of the division to military government of Germany, and we were setting up German governments in the different counties and overseeing the establishment of new German police, new German government forms, whatever was needed.
So you got into nation building,
into country building on a small scale. We were assigned to a county, we had a small detachment. My job was overseeing public safety mostly. It had to do with forming the police. And
did you encounter at that time any remnants from the concentration camps?
No. And I had really, where I was first stationed in Germany was not too far from the concentration camp Dachau. And while we did not know all the details that we know now about the concentration camps, but since I had been in the concentration camp, I had no desire to really go back and revisit another one. So I did not see any concentration camp. I was involved after the war quite a bit with a camp for displaced persons. They were mostly Polish origin that the Germans had brought over to work in their factories, mostly non-Jews. And they were concentrated in camps, and we were working on getting them sent back to Poland or wherever they wanted to go. We had a fairly large concentration of people there in this little town where I was stationed.
That was named what?
The town was named Bad Mergentheim, was in Württemberg.
In Württemberg. Then you were discharged, you returned to the United States.
I was discharged in June of 1946. My wife, I had gotten married in 1943 while I was stationed at Fort Meade, Maryland, and my wife was living nearby. And we saw each other quite a bit because I had always weekends free then. But she was, by then, had graduated from college and was living in Philadelphia. But we didn't stay in Philadelphia long. We really didn't know where we wanted to go, except that I knew I wanted to be a farmer. My wife was an artist. She came from North Carolina, but she also did not have any roots where to go. And we visited one of the Gross-Breesen, this Ernest Lowe. He had already started his own farm in Connecticut. We visited him for a short time, But with little money we had, we could not purchase a farm there. And we came to visit a cousin of my father's in upstate New York, and he suggested that we look around in upstate New York, and we found the prices were much lower as compared to Connecticut in upstate New York, and we found a farm and settled in upstate New York, and had that dairy farm for almost 34 years.
A dairy farm.
A dairy farm, yeah. We started out with 20 cows, which was at that time in 1946 the accepted minimum to make a living on.
Mm-hmm.
And we eventually went to 35 cows, and eventually built a new barn and added another farm and enlarged quite a bit, and we ended up with 60 milking cows and about 110 animals altogether.
A good life.
We had a good life, yes. I always, farming is hard work, and it changed a great deal. But if you do the kind of work you like to do,
Yes.
you don't think of it as hard work. You think
And your children?
I had two daughters. One was born in 1953, and the other one was born in 1961. Neither one became interested in farming. My wife, even though she was brought up on a tobacco farm in North Carolina, really never was interested in farming either that much. So while I was very interested, the girls never got interested. They did some work on a farm, but they never became interested in farming.
And you have grandchildren?
I have now, one daughter has two sons. One of them is 15, the other one is 12. Mm-hmm. And my younger daughter has a 10-year-old son. We are not a very religious family, but they all ended up with the baby is called Isaac, and the other two are called Abraham and Noah. Have very biblical names.
Yes. Tell us how your religious affiliation has developed from in Europe.
My background was, from my father's side, completely non-religious. From my mother's side, they were very orthodox religion, and since I was their oldest grandson, I visited them frequently, and I was exposed to some of it. But I never had, I had some religious training, but never for a very long time. I've always considered myself as a Jew, but my wife is Presbyterian, and for a short time after we settled on the farm, we did attend a Presbyterian church in that little community where we were. But my wife is not very religious oriented either, organized religion. So for quite a long time we did not attend to any service. And then I got acquainted with the Unitarian Church in the nearby town by seeing the church and seeing an outdoor sign that had a saying by Martin Buber on it. And Martin Buber was our guru in Germany. I attended some seminars that he gave. So that impressed me. And later on, the minister from that church approached my wife to exhibit some of her paintings in an art show that they had. And we got acquainted with him and with his philosophy, or the philosophy of the Unitarian Church, which did not require any dogma or any professing any definite beliefs in it, and was very much interested in tolerance toward any religion. And the people that were members of this group were in the same, I don't want to use the word intelligent, but were in the same interest, had the same interest that I had. So we made very good friends in that group, And we've been involved with the Unitarian Church in all kinds of organizations for 40 years. I know. So.
Very interesting. A few last questions, George. Have you been able to separate your feelings for Nazis from your feelings about German people?
That's a very good question. I have never come to terms with the fact that I came into Germany as an American soldier and had been kicked out of Germany, and I have never felt any hatred for the Germans as a whole. I would have tried to find some people that I knew were the well-known Nazis in our town, and if I would found them, try to press charges against them before a judicial board that the American army established. But there was never any possibility of that doing, because I could never go back to where I came from.
You've never been back?
I never been back. My sister has been back once. And I, even now, I think because I always had the feeling that hatred never resolved anything. But I feel I still have two cousins living in Germany, and they have visited me, and I have been back to Germany to visit them. I have never felt hatred toward Germany. My wife, who had never been to Germany, and came with me, and she made the remark, "This is such a beautiful country, the people are so friendly, how could these same people support Hitler?" And the same question is asked by some of the people of our group who have gone back, who became American citizens and have gone back to live in Germany. Why they have gone back, and it's a question how to answer.
Do you have any last memory or comment or summary? What do we tell children from
I think our group, this Gross-Breesen, we were together for a short time. 2 years only, most of it, some even less. And I don't know whether we were no different than other people, but we had a certain motivation, which was our German, our Jewish background. Somehow the influence that Professor Bondi had on us, we kept in contact with him. We kept writing to him, even after we were dispersed all over the world. And he and two other people published these letters and sent them out to the group. And we always kept the contact together. We became a family, so to speak. We were always, during the war, we ran into each other all over the world. And if you saw each other, it was just like meeting somebody in your family.
Yeah.
And after the war, when I established my farm in upstate New York, there was a steady stream of people that came and visited me. And we always had contact. And then in 1984, we came up with the idea of planning a reunion, getting together.
1984.
1984, and we had a reunion in upstate New York, and its response was enormous. People from Arkansas, from Washington, D.C., from the state of Washington, from all over the country came, and we had a very emotional reunion. And out of that grew another reunion that we had in 1986 in Israel, where people from all over the world came. That was a very emotional event. And then we had a reunion in 1990. The same group, people from all over came to the farm.
I think you have a newspaper clipping on top there from that reunion.
Yeah, well, this is a report.
Hold it still. I think the headline, Jews gathered to remember farm that provided refuge. That was 1990.
No, that was in 1990. We have made, my wife and I had found, I had found out that the farm was being used as a retreat, and the lady who owned it invited us to come in. And my wife
Her name,
and
I believe, is Ann Scott.
Ann Scott, yes. And while we were at the farm, a local family came, and this is a group that was there at that farm. While we were walking around, a local farmer came in, and I talked to them, and they remembered us being there in the 1940s, and I mentioned to them that we had a reunion in upstate New York, and this lady said, well, you should have a reunion on the farm. And that's really sparked it. I sent out a letter to people, do you want to have another reunion? And out of that we got this reunion. And this is the very first a paper we put together for the very first reunion in 1984 in upstate New York. That is a picture of Gross-Breesen as it existed when we were there.
Thank you so very much.
Okay.
For sharing
Sure, you spent a lot of time
your
here.
memories, your feelings, for coming all the way from upstate New York for this interview.
Well, I think I'm always looking forward to our get-together in the fall, and coming down to Richmond is going to mean a lot to the whole group.
Yes.
And my family wanted to come down too. The kids wanted to see the place. They would like, if possible, we would like to take a ride out to the farm this afternoon.
Oh, really?
And then go home that way,
I see.
if we can.
Good.
I don't know what else we need. We want to stop in the hotel.